I would say that probably the first thing is listening more to people, and as a Spaniard philosopher said, their circumstances. And number two, probably creating feasible scenarios to have them, to think about what we are doing and to prevent things from coming unexpectedly. I'm basically thinking that probably feasible now means something different than previous to the pandemics. And probably, and this is very hard and has been very hard for us, is to try not to fully concentrate on emergency because it's very important to continue working on those things that probably are not the most urgent ones, but they are the most important ones. And probably another thing is that I feel that we need to work harder on trying to understand students' lives and motivations. I think we were losing track of that before the pandemics, but I feel that now probably is worse. And not only about them, but also about the people who work at the centers, and no doubt the faculty, the teachers.
I would like to share with you is the idea that we should think more of what types of elements of teaching is important to be in present, to be together, and to focus on that. For example, the time that we are together with our students in a room is so precious that we should definitely focus more on interaction. We should more focus on sharing thoughts of critical thinking, improve this more, and really go ahead with what we did as educational developers for a long time to, for example, promote things like flipped classroom concepts and others, so that knowledge transfer is not necessarily done in collaborative settings, but more the discussion, the exchange, the questioning, and the reasoning. This is my most important lesson learned, I would say.
I'm thinking about three big things for me. One is that we have to really pay much more attention than we have in the past to the context of teaching and learning, and where they happen and what's happening around them. I think for a long time, educational developers in the US, at least, would just think about the classroom as if it existed in a vacuum. And we learned from the pandemic, we can't do that. We have to think about the world, we have to think about viruses, we have to think about everything. A second thing that I've learned that I think we need to focus on even more into the future is the role of agency, how learners and how teachers have to be active agents of their own learning, of their own teaching, right? So instead of classes being designed to be taught to students, thinking about with students and connecting them and getting their roles, because again, I think we saw this, at least in the US, when we went especially to emergency remote learning. What happened is a lot of students felt disempowered, they felt disconnected. They didn't find any meaning in what they were doing, so they just stopped. But as they were involved in 2020 and 2021 in reconstructing what higher education was, what courses were, then they became much more engaged and they found the work much more purposeful. And I think we could take a lesson for that and say, how do we help our students develop that sense of purpose, that sense of agency? And then the last thing for me is that we really need to focus on the relationships that are being developed in our courses and in our work. And so how we can help our students develop strong peer relationships within our courses, and how we can use our roles as teachers and educational developers to develop educationally purposeful relationships with our students. Those we know from the research are so powerful, and they also make the work human, connecting, purposeful, and that's what we need for higher education. That's what we need for educational development after the pandemic.
I learned that actually the social factors matter. We want to see each other, feel each other, hug each other, even if we're just colleagues. And collaborating on Zoom is okay, but it's not the same. So I think that was our main sort of, we have actually revitalized the thought about the university as a campus. And I think that's a really big one. But we also learned that we can work on Zoom, so let's do that, and particularly with international colleagues, it's possible. But let's meet also. That's one thing I learned.
I'm an e-learning consultant from University of Southern Denmark, and what I have seen and experienced is that those teachers who have taken our courses in online learning, blended learning, flipped learning, and worked with university pedagogics, they had a more easier time to handle the pandemic than those teachers who try to avoid the use of technology in their teaching. And I experienced that we still have a lot of teachers who are not comfortable with using technology in their teaching and don't have the skills they need to have to conduct teaching at a level that the things that they should do.
I think I learned the most what kind of force there is among teachers when they are really put into a catastrophic or urgent situation. I mean, some of our teachers got 3 days to redesign a course and put it online, and I think that equals for many people throughout the world, actually. It was also really interesting to see, because we checked that in projects where we asked them, so where did you get your inspiration from? And it was mainly close colleagues, which makes sense, doesn't it? Because when you're in this very urgent situation, where should you turn to? You can't read a book, so you talk to the person next to you. And that is the way things spread. And I think then the success of this has to do with how pedagogically aware is this local culture. Because if it's pedagogically aware, they can actually start to make decisions, they can evaluate, they can try out things, and they can sort of give each other hints and so on, because they think education is important. So if that is not in place, I'm pretty sure it will not work. It will just be crap, if I'm drastic to that. And we can see a lot of these things. And when on the student side, we learned that students' working network seems to be intact, because these students we checked were in year 3, so they had working groups already. Those were intact, but we also could see was that the wider networks were just disappearing. So we got among a cohort of students, a large group of smaller study networks that didn't interact with each other, and we think that has long-term negative effects on their more broad academic epistemological development. On my own personal account, I do love groups, and I couldn't see the groups on Zoom. They were individual people there, but they were not interacting with each other, and I realized from this period how dependent I am in the classroom of seeing people reacting to each other. Without that, sort of, their energy is drained from this. There is no fun, no meaning, and just hopelessly boring.
Okay, I think that COVID teaches us or taught us a lot about the academic development field, or at least remind us some important aspect that we usually know as academic developers, but we just, in the day-to-day life, we just forget. So the importance of faculty communities, I think they are pretty powerful. And then during COVID, these teachers come together and they learn from other perspectives, and that was really helpful for them to overcome COVID. Also partnerships within the university. Sometimes as centers we try to work just within our teams, but then when you have all this partnership with ICT and human resources and even other offices, that makes our work more powerful, and we create better conditions for teachers. Flexibility. Sometimes we have really structured programs, but then in these conditions we have to be flexible. And I think that is something that we should keep in the future. Like, we need some structured programs, but then we also need to have that room for flexibility. And finally, I think that we need to refine our scopes and our roles as CDLs. So we really need to think what are going to be the next 10 years of education, and then create that future as CDLs.